Children being sentenced to prison under the law is a hotly debated notion, and some even question if it is constitutional. In a fit of adrenaline, children have been known to commit heinous crimes that wreck their entire life. What are the worst crimes kids can execute? You will be surprised to know how gruesome the crimes are. Let's check out the top 10 juveniles who have been sentenced to life. 10. Eric Smith. A 13-year-old American, Eric M. Smith was sentenced to death for the 1993 horrific killing of Derek Roby, 4, in Savona, New York. On a summer evening in 1993, Eric lured 4-year-old Darren Roby into the woods while he was cycling to summer camp. He then stripped him of his clothes, strangled him to death, and hit his head with a rock. Smith's legal team maintained during his trial that he had a mental disorder, but the prosecution said that he was conscious of his conduct and knew they were unlawful. In 1994, Eric Smith was found guilty of second-degree murder and given the 9-year sentence that is the current maximum for homicides of minors. He received his first denial of parole in 2001 and has since received several more denials. His pleas for resentencing were also denied. In New York, the Child Victims Act was passed in 2019 as a result of the case, extending the statute of limitations for incidents of child sexual abuse and enabling victims to sue their abusers in civil court regardless of when the assault took place. Do you think Eric could have been a mentally ill person like how his legal team said? 9. John Silva. John was found guilty of a first-degree murder when he was 15 years old. He gagged his friend before wrapping him in cables, bandages, and elastic that was too tight, causing him to suffocate to death. He disposed of his body into a septic tank after he passed away. According to court records, John Silva devised a list of the steps he needed to do before killing the 12-year-old, including stripping the victim, covering his eyes, and gagging him. In the region where the youngster was reported missing, police and volunteers conducted a search. When police were contacted to a report of an abandoned car, a woman stepped forward and claimed she had a dream in which the body of the victim could be found. The victim's body was discovered in the bottom of the septic tank when the volunteer firefighter who was on the scene investigated the area where the woman had indicated. When questioned, John Silva, who had been listed as a person of interest, quickly confessed to killing the 12-year-old kid. At the conclusion of the trial, this adolescent murderer was found guilty and given a life sentence. 8. Brian Lee Draper. Brian Lee Draper is an American who has been convicted of murder. In 2006, in Pocatello, Idaho, Brian Lee Draper and his friend Tori Adamczyk killed Cassie Jo Stoddard, a classmate of theirs. Cassie was invited to her house by Draper and Adamczyk, who were both 16 at the time, under the pretense of a movie night. Once there, they killed her with knives by stabbing her 29 times and dumped her body in the downstairs bathroom of the house. The two lads had recorded their pre-murder planning in videos and writings, proving that the killing was deliberate. They were later found to have drawn inspiration from the Columbine High School shooting and the Scream franchise. 7. Lionel Tate. Lionel was the youngest American citizen ever given a life sentence without the chance of parole. Tate and Unick were left alone in 1999 while Tate's mother went out to run errands. Unick was found unconscious on the floor when her mother arrived home, with Tate alleging that she had fallen down the stairs. Unick suffered internal bleeding, a lacerated liver, and a shattered skull before being transported to the hospital, where she subsequently passed away. Tate's defense claimed during his trial that he killed Unick by mistake while imitating wrestling techniques he had seen on television. Prosecutors countered that Tate intentionally killed Unick and that the injuries were inconsistent with accidental play. Tate was given a life without parole sentence after being found guilty of first-degree murder. The case garnered widespread media coverage and raised discussions on how minors are handled in the criminal justice system, as well as the effects of violent media on young people. 6. Savin Schmuss. On August 18, 2016, at the residence in the Lamberton Lake Apartments in Northeast Grand Rapids, Savin Schmuss, 17, admitted to killing Hilton. According to police, Schmuss, who was 16 at the time, strangled Hilton before dumping her body close to Emerald Lake on Valentine Boulevard Northeast. Circuit Judge George Quist accepted Schmuss' guilty plea as part of a compromise that also involved dropping an active murder prosecution. The prosecution suggested a minimum sentence of 30 to 40 years as part of the agreement. Hilton's mother, Stacy Hilton, wants Schmuss to be given a life sentence. However, 2012 U.S. Supreme Court cases Miller v. Alabama and Jackson v. Hobbs determined mandatory life without parole sentences for juveniles violated their Eighth Amendment, right to protection against cruel and unusual punishment. 5. Joshua Phillips. Joshua Phillips, a 14-year-old baseball player, hit her 8-year-old neighbor girl with the ball. He pulled her into his room, strangled her for 15 minutes with a phone wire, struck her again with a bat, and then stabbed her 11 times to do the job. Maddie Clifton, then 8 years old, vanished in Jacksonville, Florida on November 3, 1998. Police started looking for her and questioning her neighbors after she was reported missing. Many volunteers helped with the search for Maddie, checking the nearby woods and dumpsters. A week after Maddie first vanished, the search for her would come to an end, but neither the searchers nor the police would find her body. It was Melissa Phillips, 14-year-old Joshua Phillips' mother. She went to check her son's waterbed, thinking it was leaking, and discovered Maddie Clifton's body underneath. She fled the residence and went straight to the police. It took the jury a little over 2 hours to find Phillips guilty of first-degree murder. He was later given a life sentence without the chance of parole since he was too young to receive the death penalty. 4. Ashley Martinson. It seems unlikely that a girl could be included on this list after savagely killing her parents. After Martinson's parents were discovered dead at her home, the authorities focused their attention on her since she had fled to Indiana with her boyfriend after posting a poem about torturing and killing people in the woods. When she was detained, she admitted to shooting her stepfather before stabbing her mother more than 30 times. She has been punished with a 120-year sentence. 3. Eddie Devine. Eddie and his friend took a woman into their car when he was just 13 years old, drove her about, and one of them assaulted her with an ice pick, while the other committed a sexual assault on her. Fortunately, the woman managed to flee when they were stopping for patrol. On December 27, 2014, Devine was detained by Flowood police in relation to a carjacking outside of Bed, Bath & Beyond. Devine is suspected of threatening to kill the woman before stealing her SUV, and police claimed he was carrying a knife. Eddie's punishment was 120 years because he was sentenced to 30 years for carjacking, 30 years for armed robbery, 30 more for kidnapping, and 30 more for sexual assault. 2. Kenneth Young. When Kenneth was 15 years old, the drug dealer who sold drugs to his mother threatened his family. As a result, Kenneth decided to take charge of the situation by aiding the drug dealer in carrying out an armed robbery. He had served as a lookout for the transaction, but there was no use of force or weapons. However, they both ended up being arrested in Georgia while fleeing a robbery. The dealer was given a single life term, while Kenneth was given 3, all without the chance of release. Young was charged as an adult despite his age and the fact that he had no prior criminal history, and he was found guilty of several drug-related felonies. He is currently sentenced to death in jail. Do you believe Kenneth deserved this level of punishment? 1. Travian Blount. The 15-year-old Travian was given 6 life sentences. At a house party, he and 2 other 18-year-olds held a bunch of teenagers at gunpoint and demanded their money, phones, and drugs. No firearms were fired, thus there were no casualties, but the offenses were treated seriously. The 18-year-old entered a guilty plea and accepted a plea agreement, but Travian went to trial and was convicted. For 24 firearm offenses, 2 felonies including an armed robbery and kidnapping, he was sentenced to 118 years in jail without the possibility of parole. It's possible that his sentence of 118 years in prison plus 6 life terms was the toughest punishment ever meted out to an American youngster for a crime other than murder. Nobody is aware of what went wrong with these children's minds or their parenting. While some of them simply had bad luck, most of them received what they seemed to deserve. Do some of these penalties strike you as being particularly harsh? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.